Hello and welcome everybody to New Earth Consciousness. Tanya here, and I'm with Jackie Rubio. Now, before we go into the interview, I just want to let the audience know Jackie has a tremendous story, and when she and I talked, it went deep. And so this interview is going to go deep, and yeah, and it's really a message of hope and illumination. And so, Jackie, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel really honored. And yeah, our first conversation, I just left that conversation feeling so uplifted and like I was really being heard and understood. And I mean, it did a lot for my heart. So I just really appreciate being on here today and being able to tell my story with you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, definitely. And so, what I want to let the audience know, so she has a book that's coming out December 16th on Amazon, and it's called From Murder to Messages. And it's 99 cents. It's going to be 99 cents on Kindle. The paperback will be coming out as well. So you want to keep your eyes open for that. After you hear her story, you're going to want to buy that book. She also can be found on Facebook. She has a group that's called Light After Darkness. And on December, she's got a 12/12 quantum healing session that you're going to be hosting for people that so that people can join and receive that healing from you. And you can also people can also find her. You guys can find her at JackieSuzanne.com. The link, all of this will be in the YouTube description here, so you can find it there. So let's dive in. So Jackie, you have a tremendous story, and so I'm just going to open the mic for you to just share.
Okay. Um, well, the story for the book starts on December 16th of 2022. My oldest son, his name is Devin. He was having some custody disputes, some pretty serious custody disputes with his ex-wife. She was making accusations and taking time away from his visits and just dragging him through court really extensively. And he was able to kind of get back on his feet and go to court and face face everything he had to face with her. And he was able to get all of his visits back for my grandson, who was 7 at the time. And he was able to, at that time, it sort of shed a light on her and her parenting and what she was, the alienation and the things that she was doing and saying and the false reports that she was making. So he actually at that time um went after full custody, and it was going his way, to be honest with you. And December 16th, he was engaged to this really, really darling lady. He'd had a really rough marriage, and she had put him through a lot, and he was kind of back on his feet. He was, engaged, and, he took a second job to pay for his custody, courts and attorneys and things like that. And so it's Christmas time. His fiance called me. She was shopping for gifts for him, and we were making our Christmas plans. There was just, so much joy in it because we finally had my grandson back. My son was finally able to, feel some joy because he'd been going through a lot, with her in the custody stuff for almost a year. He was able to feel some joy. We were making all these great plans. And then about 10 minutes later, she called me back and asked if I'd heard from my son. And I just assumed that he was with her.
Mm.
And she said, no, it's his weekend to pick up my grandson, and um I haven't heard from him. And she's like, we're Christmas shopping. Well, he never went to pick him up by himself. One of the things that he was concerned about was protecting himself from her because she was saying so many false allegations. So he'd actually asked her if they could meet at the police station to do any, visitation exchanges, and she wouldn't allow that. So he installed a dash cam in his car. So he would pull up at an angle to where the dash cam would pick everything up when he was picking my grandson up. But he still didn't go by himself because he had been told that she had bought a gun. And he said, Mom, I feel like she's just crazy enough to shoot me. But for whatever reason, this day, December 16th, 2022, he went by himself. I guess because he didn't want to make his fiance not go Christmas shopping with her family and things like that. And so he pulled up to pick up my grandson, and with he knocked on the door with no words spoken, no physical altercation, nothing. She opened the door and opened fire on him. And she shot him 9 times. So that's where my book starts. But my personal story started long before that. I was a single mom. I come from a really bad, abuse history in my family, trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse. I wouldn't say I had the best education. I was a teen mom. I struggled with drugs, and then specifically later on with alcohol. I was a really severe alcoholic when I raised my kids, especially when they got older. And I just struggled constantly with, trying to quit drinking, trying to be a mother, trying to be a good mom. And that was something that was so difficult on me after Devin had been killed, was that he would never be able to see me be a good mom. He would never be able to see me stay sober. I'd been sober for about 2.5 years when he was murdered. I'd gone through quite a lot in order to get sober. I was in a toxic relationship and I had a relapse after being sober for about a year. And I actually started a house fire with myself in it. And I had gotten third-degree burns. I'd had 3 skin graft surgeries. I was in a coma for 10 days. I was in the burn unit for 6 weeks. And that was like finally enough for me to not drink. I mean, that's the last time I've had a drink, and that was September 7th of 2020.
Mhm.
So when I got the news, the call from what happened with Devin, that was my biggest fear on top of everything else, was losing my sobriety. So I wanted to make sure, in my story includes that I I was able to maintain my sobriety after his murder, and I was only able to do that because I've received a lot of gifts from him, from what I've went through.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about like why I wrote a book and why I'm sitting in front of you today.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what it's really incredible that you have had the resilience. I mean, I can't imagine anything really more traumatizing than losing your child to to murder. But your experience was radical in that after his death, you started to receive messages from him.
Yeah, and I do go through quite a bit of that in the book too. I was able to document some of the more prominent signs with even like photographs and things. So um I don't quite understand why I was so programmed not to believe in life after death, other than I have somewhat of a Christian background as an adult, especially, that's kind of what helped get me through off of drugs and things like that, was being in a church community. But I didn't realize like how deeply embedded some of those beliefs were, that, mediumship or anything like that is, from the devil, and it's super scary. You can go to hell, things like that. So, um, I struggled a lot at first. I struggled when I would like think I got a sign from him. I would be very, very fearful. And I also struggle with a piece that some people don't quite understand. I didn't feel worthy of receiving signs from him. I didn't feel worthy that he could communicate with me. I felt like I had been a horrible alcoholic. I had been a horrible mother to him, and that he wouldn't want to reach out to me. And so I know that that piece, that's a real deep human piece, that grief and that shame and just that guilt that would block, these beautiful messages at first, for sure. And then I had this other moving piece, with religion and being fearful and afraid of going to hell and things like that, that also blocked. So I I want to present my story and my situation because I just want to give people hope that my son still came through. He worked his ass off to make sure that his mama got the message that he's okay. And I'm so grateful for that because I couldn't be sitting here in front of you telling you like I'm actually okay today because he was able to reach me. He was able to give me those messages, give me that comfort.
Yeah. And I'm curious, and I'm sure the audience is curious as well, especially maybe those who have lost someone recently. Um, how how did the messages come through? You heard his
Well,
voice, or what was it? Or was it
no,
more of just intuition, or yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it was actually some pretty concrete things. The first one that I would say that I didn't that really started to make me wonder, and I actually did include this one in the book. It was about 2 months after he died, and let me kind of explain to the audience that my grandson was in the home when he was shot and killed, and I immediately like tried to make sure that he lived with me, that he was, with me where he could be safe. And so right away, a judge, we allowed me to take him, but I kept having to go back to court because it was only temporary. And they were not willing to take her parenting rights away. She's sitting in jail where she had been videoed shooting my son, killing him, but she's considered innocent until proven guilty. And the state of Oregon would not take her custody away based on that. DHS would not get involved with it. It was
Wow.
insane. So
Wow.
I was going to court trying to, keep my grandson, have maintained custody of him. And it was really dark. It was really hard. And I was not going to be able to keep him. It was evident that they were saying, you're not like Oregon laws are this way. There's nothing I could do about it, basically. So I just remember we were outside and we were playing frisbee. And the interesting thing was for me to be able to even have him for that short period of time, I had to leave the home. I owned a home in Eastern Oregon and move to the town that my son was murdered in and my grandson went to school in so that I could keep him, in his own community, which I was happy to do that. But renting a place there is pretty difficult, especially that time of year with no,
Mm.
no warning. So we found like this, it was just this really little old mobile home out on a bunch of acreage where it had been somebody's like little farmhouse. And it had just had the most interesting it had tires on the roof to kind of help from lightning strikes,
Mm.
because it was a pure metal roof out in the middle of a field.
Mm.
So we were outside and we were playing frisbee together, and I just remember I felt okay for the first time in quite a while. We were just doing something normal. My grandson and I were throwing the frisbee back and forth. My dogs were out there. They were barking and playing, and my grandson had a smile on his face. And I just remember feeling like this feels good. I can breathe for a minute. I wasn't thinking like tomorrow when I go to court, they're probably going to take him away or my son has been murdered. It was just this really beautiful exchange between my grandson and I. And all of a sudden, the frisbee went on the roof. And so, bam, like back to reality. I don't know how to explain that, but it just snapped me right back into this shitstorm I was in. So I remember I took a ladder up and I looked up on top. I wasn't going to climb up there, but I looked up on top and I didn't see the frisbee. And I moved the ladder around to a different angle and I climbed back up and I didn't see the frisbee. And I mean, I was really disappointed. And I started to walk down the ladder and I don't know what made me do it, but I just looked straight up in the air and I said, well, Deb, I guess if you're up there, why don't you find that frisbee for us? And then I was like, oh God, Jackie, you're crazy. You're losing it. And I walked down the ladder and I didn't think anything of it. The next morning, when I went to take my grandson to school, right in front of the car, where I would have to actually walk over it to open the door to the car, was the frisbee. And I just remember like it hit my body like electric shock, you know, and I could just like think, oh my gosh, is that true? Like, and then you start to talk yourself out of it. You start to say, I just remember thinking, oh, it must have blown off. You just didn't see it. Cause I'm pretty sure it was wedged down in one of those tires because I looked at it at all angles, up on top of the roof. And I was like, oh, you just, and then I was like, well, what if an animal got up there? And so I sort of talked myself out of it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it was just like this little
Still a
shock,
little nudge. Yeah.
this
A little
little shock
something.
wave in my body that was like, I don't know, like this, like he might have, he really might have got the frisbee down for us. And to place it where it was placed, which was not just off the side of the roof or anything. It was, a lot of feet out where the cars parked out in the driveway. So
Mm.
that was definitely one of my very first inklings. And it came with like a heart expansion. It
Hmm.
felt like when I saw the frisbee, it felt like my heart palpated a little bit
Hmm.
and kind of blew up. And then
Mm.
it also could feel like just little shocks on
Yeah.
me, like little shocks on me.
Yeah.
And then my mind went into starting to, deny it or, push it out. But I think that that's when the light turned on a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was kind of the first real experience of um no, opening into, communicating with him in his afterlife. And so,
Yeah.
but it continued, right? It wasn't just that one moment. I remember where you were talking about, he would be speaking to you, and then how he said that his language at one point went from speaking in the form of I to we. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that? Because that was
Yeah.
really interesting to me.
So what early on, I mean, the grief, like between the murder and then the court battle, and like I ended up going into bankruptcy because of all the legal fees. I mean, it was such a dark place. There was nothing light. There was nothing I could get comfort out of, in my circumstances.
Sure.
So I just remember sometimes like I would hear his voice and I would think, well, if he were alive, this is what he would have said. And I felt very drawn and prompted to write it down. Even and I mean I have to say like I wasn't put together enough. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't keeping track of anything. I was so messed. I was just such a mess. But I just remember like if I would hear something and I would go, well, I guess that's what because God, it would sound like his voice. And it was just in his humor. He was a smarty pants. He had a particular style about him, the way he spoke and the things he found funny and the conversations we would have. And I was like, God, that sounds just like him. And I said, well, that is must have been what he would say to me if he were still alive. Because I'd have a thought about him or thought about, my life, and then I'd hear a response from him. So I got to no matter where I was at, if I was in the restaurant, I don't know why, but I used to cry an awful lot in restaurants when I was by myself, especially I'd sit in the restaurant and start to eat. I'd take one bite and the tears, like they would just come and they would just dump into the food that I was trying to eat. And I just like, I would hear him a lot in that scenario. And
Mhm.
so I'd write it down on a napkin. I'd hear him say like, Mom, you got snot on your face. You better wipe that off, and so I would go, well, if he were alive, that's probably exactly what he'd say to me. So for whatever reason, I was just so drawn to writing it down.
Yeah.
And that kind of like that writing, that hearing him and then saying, well, he would have said that if he were alive, and then just writing it down. There was something about that that was building and turning into kind of two-way conversations, and I'd be like starting to talk back and then he'd talk back and I would just hear it so clearly. It would be in my mind, but it would be his voice. And it would be his voice, his tone, and sometimes it would come with like physical sensations,
Yeah.
um like some tingling. I would feel tingly over top of my head. I would feel tingly on my neck a lot.
Hmm.
And he had this laugh, he had this just like he would open his mouth so wide and like ha ha, just this laugh. And I would see that in my mind and I would hear that in my mind over not very funny stuff, only stuff Devin would have thought was funny, because he did have such an odd sense of humor. And it just kind of built. And then I just know that I found automatic writing course, Michael Sandler's Inspired Nation. And I took it and I just like, okay, I've already been doing this. I mean, maybe not in some ritualistic form, but
Yeah.
I've already been definitely hearing from him. And I would like, so at that time, I would start to just like have a conversation with Devin, and he would say, pretty much, like I said, wipe your snot, you know, tell me like sort of more human talk,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
if he were sitting across from me right now and, we'd be talking about, well, that sucks what those attorneys said or whatever. It was much more like that, but it would come in. So it's so hard to explain to people how this is, but so my thoughts kind of come out
Mm.
if I'm visualizing how I'm thinking when I'm talking, like right now, I can see my thoughts come out in a sentence towards you. And so if I said, "Hey Dev, what do you think of this?" The thought would start to come out, maybe only get about to right here, and his voice, his presence, his personality would come just bam through this side, and I wouldn't even finish the thought I was thinking towards him, and it would come in like that, and his whole entire sentence. Sometimes it seemed like a paragraph,
Mm.
would come through on this side. And I didn't even get to finish my
Interesting.
one little tiny thought to him.
Yeah.
So I just realized at that time, like I'm having I'm having automatic writing with him. I'm doing this. I think I'm communicating with him. And then exactly what you were saying. So I would, then I started to do it intentionally. Like how, the guy put a little ritual in front of you and you do an introduction and you get up really early and you make it a thing.
Hmm.
And yeah, so then the writing style really changed. And he would come in, he always comes in first and he says, "Hey, Ma, or Ma, I want you to do this today, or Ma, how's it, but then it would say, we.
Mm.
We wish for you to be happy today. We comfort you. And I was like, what is going on? And I remember I reached out to a pretty famous medium that I was so blessed to get a reading with for him that really also comforted me a lot. And I really trusted her. I
Hmm.
actually wrote a lot about it in my book too, with some of what he was writing. And she verified it. She said, "What you are doing is you are writing, he's ascending." And so he's opening up to, oneness, to, a consciousness of more than just earthbound type consciousness. So I have to say, like, the writing was beautiful. It's very, very poetic. Which I'm not a poem. I'm not a poem. I'm not a poem. I don't
Oh,
write poems.
yeah.
So it was really, really poetic. In then the we, they call it, I just call them the we because that's what he keeps saying, like we, and they're saying that they are, a whole group of consciousness, like unity consciousness. They're saying that their makeup, even ascended masters are in the group, but also human beings that are on earth are in the group. It's just a matter of, people who are um, trying to learn and teach the same thing, which is unity consciousness, which is oneness.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's so powerful, and that's really interesting that you said it's that the unity consciousness is not just in these higher realms, but that there are also people on the planet also living in unity consciousness. So it's almost like a certain frequency that we can all tap into. And it seems like in your relationship with your son, kind of going on this spiritual journey with him as he's ascending, that these bigger spiritual truths were sort of kind of being illustrated to you or revealed to you as time continued to unfold.
Yeah, I have to say that I didn't know anything about really unity consciousness, or so much language that would come in, and concepts that I just I struggled with and I didn't understand them. They would come in and I was being taught this. And then I would soon after get some kind of verification, whether it was from another spiritual teacher or just, I don't know, like, I mean, so let's say like the first time I heard, we're all one, because that's what Devin writes with me a lot. He says, I am you, you are me, we are we. We are one. And I mean, I'm sorry, but to somebody who's like doesn't have any spiritual experience and who just lost their kid, that just sounds bonkers and bizarre. And it used to really trip me out, and I didn't like it. I have to say it wasn't my favorite thing. And so the word oneness would come up. And I mean, I could go, I'd be crying and upset about it. I could go outside, to go to the grocery store, and I swear to you, I would see, five license plates on the way that said one or oneness or the number
Uh-huh.
one and the word nest. I mean, all over the place. And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's going on? And I think I know one thing. I'm like probably a lot more like stubborn than most people, because I mean, these are miracles that are happening, and I am still like every day going, God, this is bullshit. This can't be true. This isn't real. This isn't what I was taught.
Yeah.
I just, I was having such a hard time, even though I was having this amazing experiences, these amazing writings. When I write, like before I've even had a cup of coffee in the morning, I don't even know my name before I have a cup of coffee, let alone to write 5 pages of poetry,
Yeah.
about spiritual concepts that I've never even heard of. So, yeah, it's been a journey, and
Wow.
I've it still hasn't stopped.
Wow. Wow. That is huge. So has this journey that you've been on, so you now offer sessions. So are you now tapped into the ability like this, you've unlocked this spiritual gift that you have where you can connect with loved ones on the other side, or what kind of gifts have you unlocked within yourself in this process?
Yeah, I don't I don't consider myself a medium. I feel like a medium. Um, who their work is so sacred, and the time that they spend developing their mediumship, I would never
Mm,
feel
yeah.
prompted to say that I am a medium. I have to say, like, I started doing Reiki,
Hmm.
and Devin started coming into my healing sessions when I would do Reiki, and I did a lot of healings and stuff on other moms who'd lost their children. And so he'll come in, and oftentimes he brings in their kids, and I hear from their kids. And um we'll do a healing and kind of like give them some rest and some relaxations, and a lot of times they themselves get to have a message from their child during the Reiki session. That's been like, and I don't ever like guarantee that, because it's not what it's about,
Well,
but
yeah, that's
that's
not something you can force, right? You're not like,
yeah.
hey, this is what I do. You're definitely going to get a message from
No,
your
I
kid.
definitely I try, but it does happen, pretty concisely. So
Yeah.
the Reiki, but when I started doing Reiki, um it's really getting a lot of information while I was giving people Reiki sessions, and I didn't really know where to go with that. Because I have a traditional Reiki instructor. My lineage is very traditional,
Yeah.
and you just don't do that. Like, if you give messages like that, it's like that's your ego. Like, you're just there to do the healing.
Yeah.
But it was so prominent for me, and I couldn't quite understand. Like, it was like kind of a lot of symbology, and I wasn't sure. So I always have to shout out to my teacher, who's Lisa Campion. She wrote The Art of Psychic Reiki,
Mm.
and when I read that book, I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I'm psychic. It's psychic. That's what's happening here. And so I was able to, I take her courses, and I started to actually intentionally develop that. And so that's intuitiveness is a big part of like my work that I do. But I do Reiki sessions, I do quantum healing sessions, intuitive sessions, and then um with the writings I get, and with the consciousness that I seem to be tapped into, um they shifted from just writing to
Mhm.
speaking out from me verbally, which I didn't believe in at all. I have to say that out of everything spiritual, The
Hmm.
least thing that I was ever interested in or believed in was channeling. I
Yeah.
didn't know, I didn't really know like what to say about it other than it seemed like it could be fraudulent
Yeah.
or that it wasn't not safe, like it could be
Well, to
also from
me,
the
it's like,
devil.
how would you know, how could you discern someone who is authentically channeling versus someone who's just making something up? That to me is like, is my personal sort of like shtick with it. It's like, are they channeling
Yeah.
some interstellar being or higher avatar or something? I mean, I don't know because I'm not the one having the experience. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I never would have wanted that experience either. Because
Right, right.
then
Yeah.
if it is real, it could always be the devil. So, that was like, but that's just the plans that, they have for me is different. So yeah, it did start to come out in a verbal channel. And then it was so interesting because I have an amazing spiritual coach and we were doing some NLP work that took me way under, and then everything kind of just sprung forth, and they have put together like some really amazing like healing specific instructions on what to do on clients, and one of them is a big healing, like it's pretty intense. It's a 4 or 5 day lineage clearing healing, and like everything that we do in that healing has been from either my son on paper or from a channel just telling the we just saying, hey, this is what you do. And I have learned so much. And they'll say something and it'll be something I've never ever heard of. And I'll look it up and it's real. It's true. Like parts of the body, parts of the specific parts of the brain,
Yeah.
specific information that I just would have never known in my waking life.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's wild. It's interesting. It brings up to me, it's just a mystery, right? Like, why? I mean, obviously, there's many people who have lost their children to acts of murder, and why, why you? Why are you the one to receive the information or whatever? Like that to me is just such a mystery. And I've had the opportunity to meet, you know, many people who have had these really just sort of mystical, unexplainable um, miracles that seem to come out of nowhere and really kind of jostle the mind in terms of like, okay, wait a minute, like who are we? Really. And that's kind of like, New Earth consciousness to me is just sort of like, okay, we're all in this process of, wow, like there is so much more to who we think we are than what we've been taught. It's like, what you were talking about of just, I was conditioned to believe this about life and about myself, and there's nothing more else to it, right? And then suddenly having this experience and sort of just like all of the veils just opening up to allowing you to really be able to see and hear and bring more, I guess, knowledge and wisdom down for the rest of humanity. Um and I'm curious, like, when you work with someone who's lost a loved one, um, what are some of the, I guess, what are some of the results or the transformation that they receive after they work with you? What are some of
Okay.
the results?
First, I just want to back up one thing though, because
Yeah,
I don't feel that my messages from Devin or the tapped inness with a bigger is not the right word, but with a collective consciousness, I don't feel that that's anything like special about me. I honestly feel that everybody has that.
yeah, well
It's
said.
just that I was so broken in in what happened that I was so much more willing,
Yeah,
you know, to open myself up in order to, try to find my son for
yeah,
one and make sure he was okay.
yeah,
And that struggle of wanting to desperately make sure that your child is okay wherever they may be,
Yeah.
and that he has to be somewhere. I just knew it. He had to be somewhere. So I feel like,
Yeah.
that in itself it doesn't mean that I have gifts that somebody else doesn't have. I think that's just a dynamite stick that goes boom,
Yeah.
until you look and you look and you look and you search and you search and you search, and so I think anybody can do that, to be honest. And then,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think that there was, any abilities like gifts as a child, but I had a very traumatic childhood from a very early age. So I don't have any memory of like an innocence, of being able to
Yeah.
know if I had, spirit guides I was talking to, or
Yeah.
anything like that. And then, and then I had 4 kids, and then I was a drug addict, and then I was an alcoholic. There was something that was always piled on top of it if they were there. I just had never had the ability to, sift through it. So then, taking a class, which seems ludicrous to me. You can take a class to be psychic. And honestly, that is exactly what happens. It's like a little muscle that you start, working, and
Yeah.
you get better and better and better at it. So that's just my little plug. Is I'm super uncomfortable with thinking like I don't think I'm special. I don't think
Yeah.
that I have something somebody else has. I
Yeah.
just think my circumstances blew it open, and I do think that anybody who's lost a loved one gets signs, and I think that they can also communicate with them. I think it's just a matter of practice and also belief. I do think that that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I just really wanted to say that. But as far as like uh, our the Reiki sessions, the quantum sessions, boy, when you're working with a client that's in really really deep grief, I mean, and I'm really, and this is something I didn't know about myself either, is like I am so empathetic.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and my like energy field and stuff must have just been constantly clogged with other people's thoughts, their emotions,
Yeah.
their all of that. So now at least I've learned to kind of keep that clear. I know what's me and I know what's somebody else most of the time. So I'm able to really feel what they're feeling, and I kind of like it comes into my own body. So I'm able to
Hmm.
clear it out of my own body and out of their body. So when they come in, they're usually really heavy,
Hmm.
really, their energy is really just murky, and there's so much grief and so much heartache. And then here's what I really want to make sure. I don't I don't do the healing. Like,
Yeah.
I, I channel it. I open it up, the space up, and I present the client to, the higher guides, the angels, the archangels, to their spirit team. I present that, and there's certain things I know, like a pattern that you're kind of supposed to go through, or how to, clear the chakras. But a lot of times I'm just observing.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm really blown away sometimes. I mean, our spirit team and our helpers, oh my God, they love us so much. And all it takes is the invitation. Like,
Yeah.
all that invitation for the client, because I always do an induction first. I always ask them for permission, and I always, say, can we call in this archangel, or and other moms, I've always asked permission to call in our kids,
Yeah.
to come be part of the session, and our spirit team and angels and archangels and spirit guides, and even more out there kind of guides, you call them in, and it's so amazing to me. Like, all they need is that invitation, and they're right there. They're right there, and they are doing the healing. I really just open the space up. So I that's how, I mean, I guess not everybody thinks that way, but that is how I think. I am like a 50-year-old overweight lady, who used to drink and smoke like crazy. I'm not going to be able to put my hands on somebody and do, a healing on them. It's really just opening it up and inviting, our guides
Yeah.
and God and Jesus to come in. They do the healing.
Wow. Amazing. Beautiful. Jackie, this has been such a powerful conversation. I really hope that whoever's listening to this, um, if you know of anybody that's grieving over a lost loved one, or especially a child, that they get a hold of this video, please send it to them. Make sure they know about Jackie and her experience. Um, I just feel really just honored to have this time with you, Jackie, and for you to just sharing your experience, and you do it in such a humble way, and it's very much, service driven, heart driven, and so thank you for what you do and having the courage to share your testimony, because it does take a lot of courage to put oneself out there and deal with a lot of Debbie Doubters or whatever. Um, but I know that, yeah, that this really is real, and it happens, and um, there's just so, like you said, we are so loved, and life doesn't end at death, at the physical death. And it's so important. That's just something that we just need to really, as a collective, to embrace that, and not be fearful of death. I think that's the fear of death is really just the ego afraid of dying. And so, yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful story. Thank you so much, Jackie, for being here. Is there anything else you would like to say before we sign off?
Well, definitely thank you for having me. I appreciate that. I guess the just the book is kind of, it's not a real long book. It's kind of straight to the point of my story, and then with a lot of inspiration as far as like the signs I got and the proof that I got that he was still there. So um I want to make sure, like, people who are in deep grief, I couldn't read a book to save my life. My there's no way. So I wanted to make sure that it was more like fitting for somebody, and it has a lot of resources in there, like teachers and mediums and people I specifically got something from that I felt safe with, that like benefited like my journey with my son. Um, and then Devin just always wants to say that after this, like, there's only love.
Mm.
It doesn't feel like it here. This doesn't feel very loving,
Yeah, right.
but he swears, like, he's like, Ma, he's like, there is nothing but love here. Like, God is nothing but love. He's like, so he always wants to talk about that, like, and make sure people know, like,
Mm.
there really is nothing but love.
Yeah, amazing. I just got goosebumps and just everywhere. So I love that. Thank you so much, Jackie. Just sending you so much love. Thank you for being here. Everyone, please like, subscribe, share this video. Buy Jackie's book. Yeah. So until next time, I hope everybody has the beautiful rest of your day. And Jackie, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now, everyone.